So I want to welcome you back to another episode of Laid Back History. And before we get into our topic, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in each week. The feedback that we got from last week's episode where we had the virtual table read for the Whiskey Rebellion Festival, I was blown away by. It has, over 5,000 views. And a lot of people sending positive feedback, people saying thank you for having the Whiskey Rebellion Festival this year. And we're very excited about it. We are so thrilled that we're going to be able to bring the festival back. And it's only going to be one day, possibly two. There might be a Friday evening thing. But on July 10th, we will be having the Whiskey Rebellion Festival. And we're just thrilled about it, that we're able to bring it back. So thank you to the Bradford House, the Whiskey Rebellion Festival, the Historical Society, the committee that works on it, and all of you for supporting it, for being able to make the festival happen again this year. So thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in, and all the kind words, the messages. It means a lot to me. It really does, for people to put in, to say thank you, or that I enjoyed it, and whatever it is, because it lets us know that we're doing the right thing, that we have the right topics, and that people are enjoying what we're doing. So thank you for that. And then lastly, thank you to all the people that have supported us, not only, by watching, but those that have made donations. It means a lot that you're willing, especially at a time like this. I was just saying to somebody that our donations are actually up over the last year. And it's during a time when people are, financially have had some issues because of the pandemic, and yet they're opening up their pockets and giving to us and donating to us. And it means so much that you're willing to do that during this time, and we need it. We've definitely needed it, but we just thank you for that. So everybody that has donated, even though I may not mention you by name all the time, thank you for everything that you have done to help support us. So now, for our topic this week, we're talking about the Underground Railroad. Let me say that again. We're talking about the Underground Railroad, the series that's on Amazon. It's like a 10-part series that premiered in the middle of May. And I've been thinking about this one for a little while because I've had people talking to me about it, bringing it up, asking me what I thought about it. And I initially decided I wasn't going to watch it, that I just wasn't going to waste my time, watching this thing, because I had heard some about it, about the historical accuracy of it. I just didn't want to watch it. But then I had so many people bringing it up that it was good and that they enjoyed it. And I saw some feedback from other Underground Railroad historians online, and I thought, all right, let's give it a chance. So I started watching it, and I will say up front, I'm going to try to have no spoilers or no major spoilers from this. But I thought, let's go ahead and give it a chance and see what happens, because I have in the past enjoyed things that aren't necessarily historically accurate. I think Gladiator is a wonderful movie, but Gladiator is not historically accurate. But I find it to be very enjoying, and I'm very entertained by it. And if you've seen the movie, you'll understand that reference. So it's I have enjoyed things like that. As some of you may know, the Whiskey Rebellion is my thing. That is kind of my expertise in what I study more than anything. And so I've read, I think, every book ever written about the Whiskey Rebellion, and most papers and journal entries written about the Whiskey Rebellion. And one of my favorites is written by a gentleman by the name of David Liss, and it's called The Whiskey Rebels. And The Whiskey Rebels is a historical fiction. So he takes the setting of the Whiskey Rebellion and builds this story around it. And it's not true. None of the people are factual. I mean, when they talk about Hamilton and some of those people, yes. But most of the figures, that they're talking about on the frontier are not historical figures. They're just made up. The story that he's telling wrapped around it is made up. But he did a ton of research in before he wrote the book. He did a ton of research, and he fully understood the excise tax and the Whiskey Rebellion and the atmosphere of the day. And I think that book does a better job than anyone I've ever read in setting the mood and the atmosphere of the Whiskey Rebellion. It really lets you understand the mindset of the people out here, the mindset of those in Philadelphia, the tensions between them, and the issues that the farmers faced. And so even though it's a historical fiction, I still am a fan of it. And I tell people to, that they should read if they want to learn about the Whiskey Rebellion, with the caveat, the whole story's made up. But it gives you this great insight into the rebellion. And so I have been known to be a fan of things that aren't necessarily historically accurate. But at the same time, something like the Underground Railroad series that is listed as a fantasy historical drama scares me. The fantasy part of it put me off, and I thought, no, I don't want that. But as I said, I heard some good things about it, and I thought, okay, I'll watch it. In the first episode, not giving away too much, the main character, Cora, is escaping from Georgia. A couple of things that bothered me about it. The first one being, they had a train. They had an actual physical railroad that was underground that they were using. And that did bother me, because as any historian or anybody that knows anything about the Underground Railroad knows, there was no train. Yet people think there was. People really do sometimes think there was a train. In fact, I remember my favorite story of doing tours at the Historical Society is somebody came in here. There was a lady that came in with her son, and he was maybe 5, 6, at the most. And I started the tour, and I started explaining about the fact that there was no, that the Underground Railroad, it wasn't a railroad and it wasn't underground. They just used it, to hide. The underground was just, it was hidden. And the kid looks up at his mom and goes, "You mean I'm not going to get to ride a train?" And he just put his head up against her thigh, her hip, and didn't look at me the rest of the tour because he was so disappointed I didn't have a train. So the thing that worries me about a series that depicts the Underground Railroad as an underground railroad is that people already think there's a train, and it worries me that it's going to reinforce that. So that's one of the things that worried me about it, but I still gave it a chance. And a lot of things put me off. The towns, they had skyscrapers, in the towns. The clothes, some of the clothes were from the 1890s, and they had, the Underground Railroad, and the themes that they were bringing in were themes from the 19th and 20th century, for example, North Carolina was a free state in this depiction. Now, there weren't slaves, but there also weren't any African Americans. They had basically outlawed slavery, but also African Americans. So if you were found, they would lynch you. But this is modeled off of Oregon, because when they were founded, 1859 or whatever it was, they were founded as a free state, but they also didn't want African Americans there. But it didn't happen in North Carolina. They bring in themes like like forced sterilization, which didn't happen during slavery. Things like the Tuskegee syphilis studies, and I'm trying to think what else there was. Some of the race riots that occurred in the 1960s. Themes from that they brought into it, and so I'm like, well, that didn't happen, and that didn't happen, and that did. And so I was frustrated when I was watching it. But then I started looking at it a little bit differently. And trying to give it a chance. And one of the things, that I found interesting is that there were other historians that were doing the same thing. This is a book that we have at the Historical Society called Bound for Canaan. It was written by Fergus Borderwick. Now, this is an excellent book on the Underground Railroad and on slavery. I mean, this is just, one of the more quintessential works when it comes to the Underground Railroad. And Fergus watched the 10-part series, and he had a article that he wrote about it. And he looked at it. I thought he would really beat it up, but what he instead did was say, I appreciated the themes, I didn't appreciate the history. And I mean, because this guy knows the history, and one of his things was he brought up was the idea of a freedom seeker escaping from Georgia and making it all the way up north. It didn't. It very rarely happened. I won't say it didn't. It very rarely happened, as he points out, that most of the freedom seekers, most of those that escaped from Maryland, Virginia, border states, those that bordered with the free states. Very few came from the deep south. Think about what you would have had to cross to get all the way to the north. And yet you have Cora escaping from Georgia. So that's one of the things that he mentioned and he brought up, and that I didn't think about at the time until I read his article. And then I was like, oh yeah, you're exactly right about that. So of course he is. He's one of the foremost historians. So I started looking at it as something a little bit different. And the writer of the book, because it's based off of a book, Colin Whitehead, based off of the book of the same title, he was trying to, he was setting it in the 1850s, but he wanted to bring in all kinds of themes. He was looking at racism. It wasn't just a book about slavery. He was looking at the struggle that African Americans have had throughout their time here. And so he was looking at racism and hatred as a whole, and was bringing in is bringing in all these other themes to tell that story, about telling the struggle. The director of it, Barry Jenkins, the director of the TV show, said he wasn't trying to do something and tell the story of Black trauma, but of Black victory, I think is how he worded it. And so they were trying to bring in these different aspects of race, of racism, and tie them in together using 1850s antebellum South as the setting. And so when you look at it that way, if you look at it like that, it's not so bad. Then it's teaching you something. Now there's a lesson to be learned. And again, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but you're starting to understand that experience that they would have had. So many books and movies about the Underground Railroad and slavery. They show the violence, of a slave being whipped, or being mistreated, but they don't touch on the emotions all the time. This does. This is going into the emotions of being a freedom seeker, of being a slave, of being a fugitive, of being hunted, of struggling and trying to build a life in this atmosphere, and having, highs and lows. And so it's about emotion. It's about the emotion of these people. And so in that respect, I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. I think it really does a very good job of setting the tone, of giving you the feeling and showing you the emotion that these people were going through, that it was a daily struggle. It wasn't just physical pain, it was mental pain. So I think in that respect, it's a very good series, and I would recommend it. But I also think it's dangerous in this respect. I think education at the high school level, or at the elementary, middle, and high school level, has been lacking when it comes to history. And this is not a knock on the teachers. They have a certain curriculum they have to follow. There are still wonderful teachers out there that try to reach outside of that curriculum, but they're stuck a lot of times. And so there's not a great understanding of history, and I'm just saying in this respect, of the Underground Railroad, which is why you have people that think that there's an Underground Railroad, that they don't understand it's a metaphor for the secret homes and safe houses, and you know, the conductors are abolitionists and free blacks that are helping, you know, others escape. And so when they see something like this, they see it as history. You know, for me to look back and say, well, there are no skyscrapers in the 1850s. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of children, a lot of adults may not know that. And so we get so much of what we know from social media, from streaming sites, YouTube, Amazon, from TV, that it worries me that something like this will be taken as true history. And I understand what the author and the director are trying to do, and I think they're to be commended for what they're doing, because I think we need to understand the struggle, not just slaves, but of African Americans and the racism that they face on a daily basis. And we need to know the emotions behind it. And so I think they are to be commended for that. But I think that it is dangerous in some ways, because people might start to think, when it comes to history, that this is history, that this is how it happened, that there were underground railroads, that there were quilts that were being used as maps, because there weren't. And so that's the thing that worries me about something like this. But in the end, I would recommend watching it. Watching it, though, with the understanding it's not a historical work. It is not a documentary. It is a fictional drama fantasy that is being used, that a historic setting is being used to tell a story. And like I said, when it comes to things like David Liss's Whiskey Rebels, I think it's wonderful and extremely useful. And this may be useful too. In fact, it is useful too. Just make sure that if you're watching it with somebody, if you're watching it with a son or with a child, with a grandchild, whatever it is, that you let them know that this isn't how it happened, and maybe use it as a teaching moment to teach them what the Underground Railroad really was. And if you aren't sure of it, come to us, come to the Lemoyne House. That's the story we tell. We talk about what the abolitionist movement was and what the Underground Railroad was, and we try to tell the true story of that. So it's kind of a quick episode, but that's my thoughts on Amazon's The Underground Railroad. But also, if you want to know the history of the Underground Railroad, I do recommend Bound for Canaan by Fergus Borderwick. So definitely a good one. You can find it on Amazon, actually. So I think that's it, though. So I want to thank, this is actually one of my favorite shirts that I have now. I wear this all the time. So thank you, Steel City Harley Davidson. I really appreciate the shirts. I appreciate all the shirts that I get. So, if you have any more, if you have, or anybody has any, send them my way. I'll wear them on one of the episodes. So, but at any rate, thank you again so much for watching. Join us Thursday. There will finally be another episode of Searchers. I apologize. I just haven't had time to get any of those uploaded. So we will continue our season 1 review on Thursday. And then next Tuesday is going to be a great episode of Laid Back History. I didn't have time to get it all edited. It's going to be a longer episode, or I might break it into 2. I'm not sure. Rich, Brian, and I went out the Saturday before Memorial Day and went out and visited some of the grave sites of patriots from Washington County, men that fought in the American Revolution and out here on the frontier. And so we stopped at 3 different sites and told all the history. Unfortunately, it was a rainy day, so we were kind of running out to the gravesite and then getting back in the car. So we told a lot of the history actually in the car, but still, it was a great trip. We had a wonderful time doing it. And so I think you'll really enjoy that. So that'll be next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So I think that's it. So again, thank you so much for watching. If you want to make a donation and help to support this program and others that the Historical Society does, you can do that by visiting www.wchspa.org and clicking Donate Now or Join Now if you want to become a member. So I think that's it, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next week for another episode